Hi, welcome to CMMC Automation. On this channel, we share with you tips on how to automate your CMMC compliance efforts using ChatGPT to save your company considerable time and resources. My name is Phillips. I am the president and founder of Aspire Cyber. We specialize in helping small defense contractors prepare for their CMMC assessments. Also, I am a certified CMMC assessor and instructor. Let's get to the content. Today I'll be using ChatGPT to show you how to automate the compliance activities for CMMC Level 1 Practice 3.1.2. For this Level 1 practice, we will be using the CMMC Level 1 Assessment Guide. Remember, I prefer using this because it has all the information that NIST SP 800-171 Alpha has in it, but it also includes the discussion section, examples. So we're back in ChatGPT and we're using the same conversation that we use for the 3.1.1 practice. And we're going to use this same conversation for all of the practices contained in this SP 800-171. All 110 practices and 320 assessment objectives. Remember, we cannot forget about those assessment objectives because that really is where the rubber meets the road. That's how, if you perform an internal assessment for level 1, that's how you can validate that you have fully satisfied the requirements for the practice. And then if you need to have a level 2 assessment performed by a C3PAO, then those assessment objectives is how those assessors are going to validate that you have fully implemented the practice. So let's get started. Before I paste in the practice into ChatGPT, remember, I always want to give ChatGPT guidance. So just as I did for 3.1.1, I'm going to do it again for each practice just to let ChatGPT know the type of responses that I am expecting. So the first one, I'm letting ChatGPT know I will provide you with the 800-171 practices and objectives. Provide me concise responses that include specific administrative and technical controls. And then also letting ChatGPT know I don't need a response for this prompt. Understood. All right. Like when ChatGPT follows directions. Just to provide additional context, I wanted to let ChatGPT know that I want the responses to also include estimated time required to complete the activity, the expertise, and the cost for the solutions. And again, I don't need a response for this prompt. All right. Now I think ChatGPT is ready to roll. Now we got it warmed up. Let's get to work. We'll start off by pasting in the practice for 3.1.2. Limit information system access to the type of transactions and functions that authorized users are permitted to execute. So ChatGPT is letting me know, okay, the administrative controls, the access control policy. Remember, that's going to be our governance for everything we do related to access control. Make sure we have implement role-based access control strategy. Use role-based access control. So when we're saying that, it's like if you think about in your organizations, users are going to have different roles. For example, HR, you may assign specific permissions to someone working in HR based on their role, or someone in finance or IT. All those individuals will have different roles based on their responsibilities. We want to make sure we're configuring our network devices such as firewalls and routers to restrict user roles and permissions. Giving us an estimated time to implement, 1 to 3 months. Expertise, we're going to need IT security or consultant. This isn't for the technical side of it. It's not really a do-it-yourself. You want to have that security expertise, and then saying the cost will vary. Okay, next I'm pasting in the assessment objective for 3.1.2. So the types of transactions and functions that authorized users are permitted to execute are defined. All right, now ChatGPT is back operational. It's letting me know, all right, to satisfy the requirements for this assessment objective, these are some things we need to do. Those administrative controls, clearly define the types of transactions and functions allowed for each role. Periodically review and update the access control policy. We want to map the defined roles and permissions to the technical controls. Role-based access control. And as I've mentioned, so within the access control domain, there's 22 practices, and a lot of the especially technical controls are going to overlap. So for example, once you implement a centralized access control repository, so something like LDAP, then you're going to be able to satisfy a lot of these practices and assessment objectives within the access control domain. So that was the first assessment objective. So really nothing new that we haven't already been recommended by ChatGPT, because again, a lot of these controls are going to overlap. So the next assessment objective, we want system access is limited to the defined types of transactions and functions for authorized users. ChatGPT is telling us exactly how we would want to go about limiting system access. On a regular review and update our policy. That's a recurring suggestion. Make sure we're training our employees on access control. Make sure we're training employees on the access control policy, emphasizing the importance for following established rules and procedures. Got role-based access, access control lists. We want to monitor our SIM. ChatGPT is giving you good guidance on how to satisfy the practice and corresponding assessment objectives, recommending administrative and technical controls. Now I'm going to probe ChatGPT further to give us some additional guidance. So ChatGPT did mention the importance of having access control lists. Let's see what a sample access control list looks like. So here we go. In chart format, create a sample access control list. See, ChatGPT is going to work, giving us the user role, resource, the different functions, and permissions. So we have our administrator. They can create, read, update, delete. Manager can do the same. HR specialist, maybe can only read. So just kind of gives you an idea of what an access control list would look like. And if you're going through a CMMC level 2 assessment, then you're going to want to ensure that you have this evidence where you can show the assessor that yes, we have our access control list. These are the users that have access to the sensitive systems, and these are their functions and transactions based on their user access. So whether that's role-based access or however you're defining your access control, you want to make sure you have it documented. So again, this is an example where ChatGPT can, instead of starting from scratch trying to figure out what you need to do, ChatGPT can automate this process for you. Give you an example. You can use this template to get started for your own organization. So now that we have the basic guidance that ChatGPT has given us for the practice and assessment objectives, we're going to continue to prompt ChatGPT, which I encourage you to do. If you still are not clear on what steps you should take to satisfy the practice and assessment objectives, just continue to prompt ChatGPT for more information. So since this practice focuses on the functions and transactions, let's get some examples on what's some common user IT functions and transactions from ChatGPT. So we have the function being able to log in, log out, reset your password, uploading files, sharing files, sending emails, being able to add or remove employee accounts, processing payroll. So all these are different functions and transactions that you absolutely want to make sure that are assigned properly, tracked, audited, just to ensure that each user has the appropriate access. Customer support, sales, marketing. So this kind of goes back to the role-based access control, where depending on your role in the organization, you'll have different access and permissions. So within the discussion section of the assessment guide, it talks about enforcing the permission restriction. So let's get some guidance from ChatGPT on how we can do that. So I want to say outline procedures for addressing access enforcement. So it doesn't make sense to just have it in a policy, administrative control, and not have the technical control to actually enforce it. So really the administrative control and the technical controls complement each other. So of course we're going to have this all established, defined in our access control policy, but then the technical control we're going to have that role-based access control, mapping the defined roles and permissions. Access control list, and that can be on our VPN concentrator, our firewall, just enforcing that control. Our centralized account management solution like LDAP, Always want to make sure we're training employees to know exactly what's expected of them, what are the consequences for not following the policies, and then how to report if they do identify a violation of policies. Always need to monitor and audit the user access, or SIM tool is one technical control we can use to consolidate all of those logs and being able to identify potential issues. As employees get promoted or change positions within the organization, we want to make sure that they are not essentially having permission creep, where maybe in their previous role they needed permission for certain systems, but in a new role they don't. So we want to make sure that we're performing these periodic reviews and ensuring that employees have only the amount of access that they need, so that least privileged. If they don't need access to the systems, then remove that access. Also, in the discussion section of the assessment guide, it talks about just restrictions related to time of day, point of origin, etc. We're going to ask ChatGPT to give us some practical examples of what those restrictions consist of. So give practical examples of access attribute restrictions such as time of day, day of week, point of origin, and suggest technical controls that can be used to enforce these restrictions. Let's see what we get. So for example, time of day, we can limit access to financial data outside of business hours, outside of that 9 to 5 p.m. to reduce the risk of unauthorized access or data breaches. So technical controls to do that, have our firewalls, IAM solution. Day of week, we can restrict people having access only during a work week. So during the weekends, access is restricted. Again, our firewall is a solution that can do that. Point of origin, only allowing remote employees to access resources from specific or pre-approved locations, such as their home or satellite offices. But if they're logging in from China, then that's something that we can block from a technical standpoint. Maybe have that network access control or VPN. So this is just one of the many ways that ChatGPT can really help put everything in the context for you, give you practical examples, detailed step-by-step guidance on how to satisfy the practices and assessment objectives for NIST SB 800-171. And as I mentioned, by me looking at the discussion section, the examples in the assessment guide for the practice, I can use that information and probe ChatGPT to give me additional examples and guidance. At this point, I'm pretty happy with the guidance that ChatGPT has given me as a certified CMMC provisional assessor. I think that the guidance is spot on. Now you just need to execute to implement these technical and administrative controls to satisfy this practice and assessment objectives. So for this one, it's pretty straightforward, only 2 assessment objectives. Now, I'm all about you actually having actionable guidance. So I like to probe ChatGPT to pretty much consolidate all of the recommendations given into a chart format so that you can get started. You know exactly where to start. So now I'm asking ChatGPT in chart format, summarize the guidance that you provided today, including technical and administrative controls, estimated time to implement, and estimated cost and complexity for each control. Going to the guidance, ChatGPT told us to define the user roles and permissions. So that's an administrative process. Can take 1 or 2 weeks. Low cost, low complexity. Pretty straightforward. Okay, what users are in your organization? What permissions do they have? Have our access control policy. Again, we know that ChatGPT can create that policy for us, at least a template, and then from there you'll just customize it to your organization. But ChatGPT will give you that good starting point. Implement role-based access control. So we're going to need to select a technical solution for this control. So these are our technical controls: enforce access control mechanisms, employee training. ChatGPT can help you create that employee training for access control. Monitor and access, monitor and audit access, periodic reviews. That's administrative. Time of day restrictions, day of the week restrictions, point of origin restriction. These are just some examples of restrictions that you can impose. You can probe ChatGPT for additional examples. So this chart does a good job of summarizing it all. All right, so at this point, I'm going to probe ChatGPT even further. Really want to get my money's worth. So I'm going to say in chart format, recommend specific technical solutions and dollar amount estimates for the cost of the solutions. So instead of a low, medium, high, I actually want to see if ChatGPT will give me a dollar amount estimate. Keeping in mind, we know this is only going to be a rough estimate. So now it's telling me, okay, for role-based access control, we need an identity access management solution. Network access. So it's giving us, now it is giving us an estimated price range. So that is helpful. But what I do still want to see is actually specifically recommend solutions. Okay, so let's see. Now I'm going to ask ChatGPT recommend the names of specific technical solutions. Let's see if ChatGPT will bite on that. There we go. So that's very helpful. So if you don't know exactly where to start in terms of trying to evaluate these technical solutions by ChatGPT giving you a list of specific technical solutions, then that's a good starting point. So from there, you can probe ChatGPT further to give you additional information about each solution and help you try to select one. But ultimately, obviously, you want to check with the different vendors and have those sales calls and demos before you make a final decision. But ChatGPT gives you a good starting point. So when we're looking at RBAC, we got Active Directory, Okta. Those are two really probably the most popular ones. Google Cloud Identity, one login. We want to enforce access control. We have the Cisco Identity Services, Aruba ClearPass, Fortinet. For our SIM, we have Splunk, IBM QRadar, Logarithm. Time of day, Okta can help with that, IAM. So this is a really good start point. You can continue to probe ChatGPT further and further and further. So, but I think it's a good stopping point for us today. We really fully explored what it will take to satisfy the 3.1.2 practice, which is a level 1 practice for CMMC, focusing on protecting federal contract information. So if you have any feedback, certainly leave them in the comments. I'm always happy to respond and give you as much guidance as I can. Happy to chat with you. You can contact me at dphillips@aspirecyber.com. And I'll be back next time for 3.1.3. Thanks for watching CMMC Automation. I hope that you got a lot of value from today's video and you use ChatGPT to automate your CMMC efforts. It's going to save your company a lot of time and money. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me at Aspire Cyber. Also, you can leave your questions in the comments down below. Be sure to subscribe because it helps out this channel immensely. I really appreciate it, and good luck to you on your CMMC journey.